'Tis I, your old pal King Chuck. I hope you had a wonderful weekend. I sure as hell did. And I got that big thing crossed off my bucket list. Yep, a 30-year wait. And that 30-year wait was to see Nine Inch Nails in concert. Yes, Trent Reznor, now in his 60s. He really rocked the house on Sunday at Vandal Arena. And, of course, story is that, Nine Inch Nails, of course, was just a one-man band for many years, and then he added a new guy, Atticus Ross, who is a guy from England, and so he's the other member of Nine Inch Nails now officially, so he was there too. And so anyway, so Nine Inch Nails, of course, they played all their hits: Closer, Bite the Hand That Feeds, We're in This Together, and March of the Pigs, and even the deeper tracks like Kapiava and Gave Up. I checked the other, I like to check sometimes what bands play in individual cities. They do mix it up, and Trent did for Grand Rapids as well. I noticed that he definitely did not play Heresy. Of course, of course, Grand Rapids is, Jeebus Freak City, and, I'm pretty sure that a few folks would not be really happy about a song whose chorus goes, "God is dead and no one cares." It is a good song, though, and, Trent has a few good points with that tune. But, of course, it started at 8 o'clock. And it started with a guy who goes by the name of Boys Noize, and he was standing up on his stage by the mixing board guys, sound crew, and he had a little stage where he was playing off of CDJs, and it was mostly remixes of instrumental industrial stuff, basically. And then he would make, he did play a remix of Down in It from Pretty Hate Machine. And of course, I got a really big kick out of this. He dropped in Goodbye Horses by Q Lazzarus. Oh, love that song. The late great Q Lazzarus, very mysterious woman. She lived a very low profile throughout much of her life, and Goodbye Horses was pretty much the only major song that she was famous for. And of course, that song would become a classic from Silence of the Lambs. Yes, Buffalo Bill. It puts the lotion in the basket. Buffalo Bill and his penis tucked between his legs. That is such a creepy ass scene, but hey, it is a good song, I will admit. I know Q Lazzarus died a few years ago. She was like 56 or something like that. Yeah, she lived a very mysterious life, I heard. Yeah, she was one of those people who people don't know a whole lot about. And, she never gave interviews and stuff like that. But anyway, and of course, there were two other stages. One where Trent and Atticus and Boys Noize would come together, and, they would play the more electronic stuff like Closer, and Trent started the show with a ballad, and I noticed that the keys were kind of fading out. I wonder if that was intentional or not. But anyway, of course, the full band was on stage, and they performed behind these very weird curtains. That they projected images on it, and I noticed that there was a curtain between Trent and the drummer. And what was funny was it reminded me, years and years ago, about 30 years ago, Trent got himself into really deep shit because he threw a mic stand at his drummer. And, I talked about, so I decided to talk to a friend of mine, a family friend who worked in the record industry. And, he was a close friend of my mother's. And I used to know a couple of folks who worked in the record industry. My uncle, who passed away a number of years ago, and my mom's friend, whom she went to school with. And, anyway, long story short, he met a lot of really big, a lot of big shots over the years. And he said that most of the people he met were really nice. And Trent was one of them. Trent's an actual really nice guy, and people do misunderstand him because he was musically he's a guy with rage in his heart, and but he basically leaves the rage to his music. But in real life, he is I guess he's a real shy guy. Howard Stern has said for years he really wanted to interview Trent, but he's been warned that Trent is not a really good interview because he's kind of boring, frankly. So, but, I would love if he came on Howard Stern. Hell, he helped, David Bowie with I'm Afraid of Americans, and that was his really big song from the 90s. Oh, love that song. Yeah, that song is definitely, he actually performed I'm Afraid of Americans on Sunday. But all I can say is my take on Trent, by the way, is that he was a childhood hero of mine, and I'm really proud that I got to see him in concert. And the guy still has a lot of energy for a man his age. He's I think he's 61 now, 61, and him just running back and forth between stages, just rushing and hustling, because that's kind of how they designed the show. He did a few numbers that were electronic, and a few numbers that were, the hard rockin' type, and Trent knows what he's doing, and he doesn't go out and tour every day. I'm glad he actually came to Grand Rapids. There was some fears that, it wouldn't sell out because ticket sales allegedly had been kind of comme ci, comme ça, but that's only because, people, because ticket prices were a little high, for this show. I paid for 2 tickets in an upper bowl right between the 2 stages, stage right, I think it was, $250 for 2 tickets. And I always buy 2 tickets because in case a concert buddy wants to come with me, and of course I found one, my cousin who drove all the way from Traverse City. And so anyway, yes, we had a really fun time. And of course, if Trent ever comes back to Grand Rapids, I'll pray and hope that I'll get better tickets this time. Yeah. But who knows? Another thing I did this weekend, by the way, was Howard Stern had Kate Hudson on the show today. Kate Hudson, of course, is nominated for Best Actress for Song Sung Blue. I saw the movie this weekend on streaming. What a beautiful movie. The movie was beautiful but tragic at the same time. Kate plays a woman who, she and her husband do a Neil Diamond tribute act called Thunder and Lightning. And Lightning and Thunder, actually. I got it a little bit mixed up, but beautiful movie. I mean, even if you don't care for Neil Diamond's music, I mean, Neil was a little bit before my time, kind of. But, I mean, I'll be honest with you. I mean, that, Sweet Caroline always is a crowd pleaser. And I think my favorite Neil memory was the fact that many years ago, he, when there was the bombing during the Boston Marathon, of course, the Red Sox played a few days later, and I guess they canceled the game originally, but then they played another game a few days later, and Neil wanted to cheer the people of Boston up by doing the song live. And it was one of his final appearances, because Neil unfortunately had to retire due to Parkinson's disease. And he tried to do Sweet Caroline a few years ago during an event, but somebody actually had to sing it for him, because he, that's the problem with Parkinson's. He can't talk above a whisper hardly at all. But it was, it was a good movie, and I think she deserves the Oscar big time. She gained 15 pounds to appear in this movie, because, the woman that she played was a little bit of a chubby, a little chunky woman. But hey, you gotta do what, in Hollywood, you gotta do what you gotta do, But, she was on Howard Stern today, and they talked about the movie. Howard is a huge fan of the movie. I agree. Great movie. I loved it when Howard actually tried, asked Kate what she was wearing when she learned, what she wore in bed. And she was like, the old Howard's coming out. Because a lot of people get angry at the fact that Howard has kind of toned down over the years. I think it might be a serious thing, but Howard has always said, he's trying to, he just wants more A-list guests on the show. And, Kate's a definite A-lister. I mean, hey, nominated for an Oscar. So, I mean, I'll be honest with you, if you haven't seen Sun Blue, see it, please. By the way, Kate was wearing a mesh outfit while she excuse me. Yeah, she said that she was actually wearing like a mesh see-through outfit while she was when she heard that she was nominated for an Oscar. So there you go. Okay, so let's move on and talk about tonight. And tonight is the big night. The State of the Union. And I'll be in bed at the time. And I don't care. The sun is going to go down tonight at... let me look at my watch here. 6:26 p.m. And tomorrow morning it will rise at about 7:30 or so. And all I can say is, it's going to be a usual Donald Trump speech. Him crying and carrying on. He's going to cry about the tariffs and the Supreme Court and the fact that he got the Supreme Court to try to agree with him on everything. And guess what happened? Yes, they've done some damage. This Supreme Court, of course, they were the ones responsible for making sure that women in a lot of states can't get an abortion now. And some women have died because of this. Because they basically said that Roe v. Wade is now unconstitutional. So get this. So now, of course, last week they said that Trump's tariffs, which are basically an unfair tax put on the American citizen, Trump's mindset, basically Trump was telling everyone that, we're getting unfair trade deals from other countries. So that's why he put tariffs on this country and that country, blah, 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 and these tariffs are supposed to put money back into the economy. No, it does not. The tariffs have made $200 billion. Some big corporations are now suing by saying that, the tariffs have done nothing but ruin the businesses. Fax is suing. I know Costco is suing. Costco, they've tried real hard not to raise prices on a lot of items, but, I get my coffee from Costco. That went up from $12 to like $18. And the reason being is because you can't grow coffee in America. Are you stupid? That's what Trump wants. He basically thinks that American companies should thrive with American items. But guess what? The company I work for, it doesn't work that way. The truth is Donald Trump is screwing the American consumer. And his deals are fucking people up. And not only that, his people were supposed to release the Epstein files. They've barely even scratched the surface. And not only that, look at what Kash Patel did. He was out there partying with the men's hockey team over in, during the Olympics, chugging beer, and then, Trump called the men's hockey team, congratulating them and saying, I don't care about the women's team. And now the women's team is not going to go to the White House, but the men's team will. Because they all love Trump, because they're all mega millionaires. Of course, some of them play for, NHL teams. And the reality is, folks, is that, this is the most anti-woman president we've ever had, folks. He's telling women they all need to go, they can't get an abortion, but it's okay for them to be a sex slave because, hey, Trump's all over the Epstein files. He was buddies, and Trump made up bullshit saying, I parted ways with him. Yeah, really. And, what's sad is that because of the Epstein files, you look at what happened in England, the Prince Andrew, he just got arrested and charged with his involvement. In other countries, people got arrested for their involvement. But other people, different story. I mean, look at what that Wasserman guy, the only punishment he got was the fact that now, he's having to sell his company because he's lost a lot of clients, like Chaperone. And, this is why the justice system of America sucks. And not only that, we have an FBI leader, the guy who runs the FBI, Kash Patel, Indian guy, he's running the FBI like he's running a liquor store, like a Indian liquor store. And, it's like sometimes I'll go to a Indian liquor store and all the shit they have on their shelf is from Aldi. And Aldi, they're dirt cheap, it's like, for a bottle of ketchup, it's like $1.50. But guess what? The story with Aldi, so what they will do is they'll get some ketchup and a couple of gallons of milk, and they'll jack up the price by $2 an item. Oh man, I know I shouldn't trash Indian people like that. I mean, I know there, up in northern Michigan, there's a little supermarket in Lake Leelanau called NJ's. They're actually owned by an Indian family, and they've owned it now for 20 years. It was originally owned by the Plamondon family for decades. Yeah, they were actually the founders. NJ stood for Noah J. Plamondon, and then his two sons took over the store, and then one of the guy's sons took over the store, and then Wayne was the last one. Wayne ended up selling it to the Indians. And they've actually done a good job at the store, but unfortunately there was a fire last year at the store. And here's something that was good. The place was shuttered. The guy who owns the store actually paid his employees. Because I guess, because he does care about his workers. So that's good news. Instead, so they don't have to get a job. But here's another thing I want to talk about. The sad truth, folks, is Americans deserve better. They deserve a good 40-hour-a-week job where they could survive and just do well. And the sad story is that I look at what's going on right now. With so many people, they don't have good health insurance. Trump took that away because of the tax subsidies that expired. Trump is out there hanging out with his buddies, and they get to party on the taxpayer dime, and Trump is saying idiotic shit. And of course, tonight Move On has teamed up with Midas Touch to do this. What are they doing? They're doing a State of the Union boycott. Counter programming, and like 30 legislators have signed up to be a part of that, as opposed to being at the State of the Union. But there are some politicians who have decided to still go to the State of the Union, some Democrats, but they're bringing along Epstein victims as their guests. So that's good. It's the Democrats that are standing up to Trump, while the Republicans are crying, 50,000. Oh, Dow Jones is 50,000. And it's gone down a couple of days. Gas prices have gone up. I mean, yesterday in Grand Rapids is what, $2.79 a gallon? Now it's $3.19. Shit ain't working, folks. Oh, no taxes on tips or overtime. Yeah, so we can keep putting money into the goddamn tariffs. That's what it all boils down to. Let me explain something to you, folks. It breaks my heart that when I was a kid, my dad, sometimes I did have bad report cards. Both my parents were assholes, unfortunately, when I was a teenager, because my mom was with her new husband, and he was an asshole, and he made her an asshole, and my dad was, always, he did not blame himself for the divorce. I mean, it just goes on and on. So the story with my father was we argued constantly when I was a teenager. And one of the things that he argued on me was, if you don't do better in school, you'll be flipping. You'll be flipping hamburgers. And then years later, when I went to, after I graduated high school, I went to another vocational school. And I had an instructor who talked to me about the industry I was about to go to versus going to work for McDonald's. And, he basically said that, McDonald's will start you up at $10 an hour, and the industry you're going to go into will start you out at $8. But the good news is, the industry will give you health insurance. They will give you dental insurance, a 401k, all the good stuff. Whereas, McDonald's ain't going to give you shit. But then again, there have been a lot of hard workers at McDonald's who move up into management. But, it's like I look at, the job I've worked at for many years. And for the first 10 and a half years, yes, it sucked. My boss was a total dipshit who didn't believe in giving people raises, who kept going. I mean, he basically ran our company like Trump ran his companies. Yeah, I mean, we were on the verge of bankruptcy, folks. We seriously were. But his partner in the business took over the business itself, and he cleaned house big time. And within 8 months, I was making, I had my first raise in 10 years. And, it's true. A good company takes care of its employees. And I wish there were more good companies out there. Instead of people who gaslight and say, people love to work here, and, everyone loves me, and blah, 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 blah. And then I hear a totally different scenario. And I've heard it too many times. The story is, so I want to tell you a story that I heard about the other day, just yesterday actually, and it broke my heart. So on Facebook, their algorithm, for some strange reason, hooked me up with the page, the Facebook page of Ripley's Believe It or Not. Remember Ripley's Believe It or Not? It started out as a comic strip back in 1918 by a guy named Robert Ripley, and it was a newspaper strip that basically was all about facts. Like, for an example, they would show people who were born weird, and and they would give facts about celebrities, and one fact I learned. And so anyway, they would send me these strips on Facebook. One of them was that Chevy Chase was the original drummer of Steely Dan, which was true. And another recent fact was that dogs are banned in Antarctica. And it just goes on and on. So what happened? So the story was, the strip itself, the current strip at the time, was drawn by a guy named Kieran Castano. And what happened was I Googled his name. I found his Instagram page. I found an interview with him. The guy looks very young. He looks like he's much younger than I am. I'll be 45 in May. So the guy was a talented and brilliant cartoonist. He drew very professional characters, and he used good fonts and all that. He made it. He was definitely walking in the footsteps of Robert Ripley. Well, then I noticed, now, even though I don't think I ever liked the page at all, they kept sending me strips. And one of the strips they sent me, so I noticed in the last couple of weeks, they were doing reprints from 2018, I believe. And the story was, the Kieran Castano story was that he started on the strip in 2021, I believe, because the previous artist died. And he was, the previous artist was, I think, in his 50s or something like that. I don't remember his name. Had an Italian last name. So the guy ended up working at Ripley. So the guy at Ripley's. So anyway, the long story short was that, so Kieran took over, and he drew the strip for 4 years. So according to Kieran Castano, he said that he came to Ripley's straight. His last job before Ripley's was working as a line cook at a restaurant. And he had, and Ripley's was his first major client as an artist. So he gave Ripley's his portfolio. They loved his work, and he got the job. So, but here's what happened. For the first couple of years, he actually took a pay cut. He actually made less money at Ripley's than he did as a line cook. And he felt it was okay for a little bit, but then, reality hit. 2 years later, he didn't get a raise. He asked Ripley's for a raise, and they were like, well, because of market conditions, we can't give you a raise. We can't do that right now. And as a result, with no raise and everything going up, Kieran actually went back to working at his old job, working at a restaurant as a line cook. Well, during the holiday season, his restaurant told everybody, all hands on deck, we're going to have a busy season. We're booked solid. And Kieran knew that he had started having to work during the week. And that meant less time for the strip. Because, it takes a couple of hours to draw a comic strip of this type. So Kieran told the syndicate, he told Ripley's, that due to a family matter, he needed to have time off during the holidays. And Ripley simply said to him, well, unfortunately, that's not how the comic business works. Nobody takes a holiday. I mean, if you want to take a holiday, then you got to produce more strips. And obviously, Kieran couldn't do that. Because it's because it's a very elaborate strip, mind you. It's not like you can pick up a pen and do some doodles. No, you got to do characters. You got to do, crazy graphics and stuff. So anyway, Kieran decided, so this is what happened. Ripley's decided to fire Kieran Castano, and according to Kieran, he was actually relieved because now he can go back to his job full time and get paid way more money than drawing the comic strip. Which is, and in a way, it's an insult to Ripley's, because guess what? Because Ripley's didn't pay this poor guy to draw the comic strip, hardly at all. And Ripley's, believe it or not, this is a comic strip that's 108 years old. And, and I noticed on Monday that it's now drawn by somebody with the last name of DeJoy. D-E-J-O-Y. DeJoy. So, Ripley's hasn't said much of anything yet, but folks, you look at all the great cartoonists of all time. Charles Schulz, Bill Watterson, Jim Davis. These people made good money from drawing the comics. And I know that some people, it is true. Many people don't read the newspapers anymore because everything is all internet. And, the papers are trying to make a couple of extra dollars by doing e-editions. And of course, they're now making you pay to read articles and stuff. But now there's paywall stuff that, can stop all that. But the reality, folks, is that the newspaper business has been dying for years. And maybe that's a huge reason why Ripley's decided to not pay their cartoonist a livable wage. But considering that, yes, Kieran Castano was the main artist of Ripley's Believe It or Not, the comic strip. The problem, too, is that the Ripley Entertainment owns the comic strip. They own it, and they have and the story is that they have a staff of writers who dig up facts, and another problem, too, that they have is that they, according to Kieran, they wouldn't pay him a livable wage, but yet they paid $12 million for a fucking golden toilet. $12 million toilet, and here's poor Kieran Castano having to go back to, slinging hash just to survive. And that's the reality of life. When I was a kid, my dad told me that flipping burgers is a lousy job. And now it's like you go to school for 4 fucking years. You learn how to become a teacher. You learn how to be a scientist. You learn how to, be a doctor. And now these jobs are hardly worth shit. I wanted to be a disc jockey growing up. And many years ago, there were some radio DJs on a radio message board that bullied me. Calling me a loser. Oh, you're an $8 an hour loser who lives in a crappy apartment. And guess what? The only thing holding me back was my former boss. But thankfully, my new boss was a lot nicer. Even though, yes, we haven't had a raise in a long time. You can thank Trump for that. I blame Trump. But here's the problem. So the story was, I used to be Facebook friends with Smitty, the DJ in Northern Michigan who worked at Rock 105 and 95.5. I've told you the saga of Smitty. He got fired from Rock 105 and 95.5 because of his on-air battle with Tom Devitt. And Devitt fought back by being a total asshole and lying to the station's advertisers. And, Devitt, of course, he eventually got fired, too, from KLT. And Devitt, I remember when Devitt got fired, he was bitching and moaning that KLT screwed him over and said, my ratings were the best in Northern Michigan. And now KLT is number 1 across the board in Northern Michigan. Yeah, and Rock 105 and 95.5, on the other hand, this is what happened. Smitty started to become a bartender at a small bar in Traverse City. And guess what happened? He realized that working at a bar paid better than working as a DJ. And now, Rock 105 and 95.5, their ratings suck. Their ratings suck. And now they're down to 2 DJs. Carmen in the morning and this old lady, Ann Carlini, who's got to be pushing 70. She worked at the Riff in Detroit back in the day. And now she's in Northern Michigan. And both DJs work 6-hour shifts. And I'm like, oh, man. And I think the reason why nobody wants to work at Rock 105 and 95.5 is because the pay sucks. Smitty even admitted that when he worked for Black Diamond Broadcasting, he never made a dime over $40,000. And I'm like, thanks to my current boss, I've actually made a hell of a lot more than $40,000. I'm doing a lot better than a lot of people. I got a 401k. I live in a small but decent house in the suburbs of Grand Rapids. I mean, I'm doing better than a lot of people. But the reality is, I feel bad for people who are on their own and trying to figure out where the hole in their ass is. I have a family, and the same thing happened to a family friend many years ago. She was a school teacher. She, many years ago, worked as a school teacher in Arizona. And she was awarded Best Teacher of the Year at her district. Well, guess what happened to her? So the story was she went through a divorce. She she wanted the extra money because now she was down to one income. So this is what happened. She started working at a small restaurant on the weekends just to make a few extra dollars. And she said that as soon as she got hired into this restaurant, they pointed and said, do this. And she didn't know what she was doing. And guess what happened? She stuck it up. She took the brunt of the whatever. And guess what happened? She's now the general manager. She moved up. She's now the general manager of this bistro. She actually quit teaching because the pay, not only did the pay sucked, but she also had to deal with asshole parents because, she had to flunk a couple of her kids. And the parents would come in and say, well, so-and-so, he needs to, I want him to go to the best schools, and after he graduates, can you bump him up to like a C? And she said, oh, hell no. Yeah, there were a couple of parents who were like that. And the sad truth is, if your kid doesn't do well in school, guess who you should blame? You. Sorry, not sorry. I understand. Like I said, in some of the classes I took, I had D's. And, my parents were blaming me because, I wasn't focusing. I wasn't concentrating. You want to know why? It was because I had to deal with a lot of bullies. I had to deal with a lot of bullshit at home. I wasn't given the best learning environment. I did the best I could in school. And I know. I went down a bumpy path sometimes. And, yes, it sucked having to live in this crappy apartment for 19 years. And, of course, it kind of sucks that my father, now my dad lives with me in a way. Yes, it kind of sucks because he is a mega Republican and he shoves Fox News down my throat sometimes. But you know what? He is my dad. He'll be 74 in May. His health is improving. He had 2 surgeries last year on his spine, and he's doing a little better. But I don't like it when he shoves Trump down my throat. And it's like, that's the problem sometimes. People love to be gaslit with Trump's bullshit, and my dad is one of them. But you know what? I know better because I'm more educated on what Trump does, and because I've lived it, folks. I've lived through Republican bullshit. I lived through working a shitty job for many years, and a boss who never cared about me or anyone else. And it's all because I was on my own. It was me against the world. And, I know. I look back and I wish my life was a little bit better. But you know what? My life is better now. Okay? But I feel bad for a lot of these 20 and 30-somethings and even people my age now who are trying to raise a small family. I had 2 of my cousins had new babies this past year. And I feel terrible for them in a way, because their kids are having, to live through Trump's bullshit and his lies and the fact that he is a very sexist and disgusting man. It's so funny that Christians look up to Trump and his bullshit, and the reality is Trump is an asshole who prays preys after women, who bankrupts businesses, and basically throws people down a path of ruin. And I am happy that his Supreme Court, reversed one of his decisions, and now he's going around crying that he wants to raise tariffs to 15% on all global tariffs. And I'm like, you know what, man? You're going to get shut down again. This has got to stop, man. I wish that Donald Trump would just, he's not in great health either. He needs to learn. And I hope, and all I can say, folks, is we need the bluest wave possible this fall. It bothers me. I turn on the TV and every political ad I see here in Michigan right now is either for Perry Johnson. I mentioned him the other day. He's a red-headed asshole who looks like he's Alan Coulter's evil twin, except Alan was a much nicer looking man. And then you got Dennis, the former mayor of Detroit, and Dennis Duggan, or whatever the fuck his name is. What? So the story is that the Republicans are actually funding his campaign due to the fact that they want a split of the they want the split among the Democrats. And unfortunately, Mike Duggan. I keep forgetting his name. I've had a long day. I'm sorry. But you see, folks, they want to split so bad, so that way the Democrats can have, so that way the Republicans can have victory here in Michigan. We can't allow it to happen, folks. We got to vote for the bluest candidates possible, so that way Donald Trump can lose. I don't want to hear, oh, you're voting for the commies. Yeah, they pulled this shit in the late 40s because FDR's policies were actually working. Yeah, the Red Scare. Yeah, I remembered hearing about all that. That's what the Republicans did, and that's what brought Eisenhower into the White House. But all I can say, folks, is the Democrats need to, we need to knock it off with this moderate bullshit. Let's get a real person into the White House who cares about us. Trump needs to go down big time. And we will win. But yes, tonight I'll be sleeping pretty well during the, I worked 10 hours today. I will definitely be sleeping pretty good through the, through Trump's little speech. Yeah, I'll be sleeping. Well, I'm sleeping like a baby. Trump will act like a baby. Okay, I gotta get going. I got stuff I gotta do. I'll talk to you later. Good day and good luck. Bye-bye for now.